Hi, I'm Betsy Urbance, Illinois Realtors Chief Legal Counsel. Today, we'll be talking about teams and advertising under the rewritten RELA as well as proposed rules. Joining me in explaining some of these provisions will be Annalise Fierstos, our legal hotline attorney at Illinois Realtors. First, let's discuss some of the defined terms under Section 1-10 of RELA. One is blind advertising, which I think everybody knows. A blind ad would be one that does not include the name of the sponsoring brokerage company or any franchise affiliation if there is one. Now, the way it was before, you had to have the company name and any franchise affiliation included in your ad piece. Now, with so much electronic advertising, the RELA and the rules under RELA have picked up which in vernacular we've come to call the one-click rule. In other words, if you have a bit of advertising that is on the web in some fashion, as long as I click one time and after that one click I get the sponsoring broker's company name, franchise affiliation, and any other required information, I'm good under the License Act. One thing that wasn't quite clear is in the blind advertising ad where we've left out information, or where can we put the information to make the ad copy complete, not deceptive or misleading, and containing all required information. This also applies, and there will be a rule to the effect, to advertising regarding an offer of an inducement or a rebate or some such thing where there might be some details that a consumer needs to know. Those details could also be behind this one click, if that makes sense. So the rules should clarify that. In other words, for your advertising, if you have a link, once you click on that link, when you get to the content behind that link, as long as you have the company name, the franchise affiliation, if you're advertising an inducement, you'd want all the terms and conditions there. One click away from everything the consumer needs to know would be what's required. That's the standard now under RELA as well as the proposed rules that we hope to have final sometime in June 2020. Also in the defined terms under Section 1-10 is managing broker. I think most everyone is familiar with the class of licensure that is managing broker. Little more education, both before you get that license and when you're doing your continuing education, you'll owe 12 more hours. You also have to be a managing broker in order to be the person in charge of a sponsoring brokerage company's office or offices. That person is now to be known, and this is a DRE initiative, as the designated managing broker. I think most of you are familiar that prior to this iteration of the License Act and the proposed rules, if a person was a managing broker and was the managing broker identified at the department as the person in charge of an office, then you had to put managing broker in your ad where your name was used. Now that requirement is if you are that person, you have to use designated managing broker to identify yourself in your advertising as the person who's in charge of the office. But a change here is that if you are a managing broker licensee, you may now use managing broker to define yourself in your advertising, and obviously you would not use designated managing broker unless you are the person that is named at the department in charge of an office or offices. Finally, a new definition, and these aren't the only new definitions, but these are the ones that I think get the most play, so we're putting them in this series so they come to your attention. One is that we have finally defined team. What is a team? A team is now defined as any two or more licensees who work together to provide real estate brokerage services. They represent to the public that they're part of a team or group. They use a team name that is different than the sponsoring broker, and they're supervised by the same managing broker and sponsored by the same broker. And very importantly, a team is not a separately formed legal entity. It's literally a group of people in an office that have two or more licensees that get together and say, hey, let's be a team. Doesn't mean they can't, too many negatives. A team could have written agreements with regard to the team they formed, but they are not a legal entity in a separate corporation, LLC, or the like.
Section 1030 of RELA addresses advertising, and it's always addressed advertising. But the changes to the Act and the new language that's been added to that section makes it very clear it applies to all advertising. The new revisions have added language, social media, digital forums, in addition to the internet and print advertising. Just making it clear, when you're doing advertising, you always want to comply with Section 1030, and that applies to everything, including your Facebook page or any kind of web information that you are sending out. Everything across the board is governed by Section 1030. Section 1030A has been changed. Team names have always been prohibited from using inherently misleading terms, but the changes to the Act have now defined those misleading terms. Now, keep in mind, these are not exclusive. There may be other terms out there that could be misleading, but the Act has laid out some terms that definitely need to be avoided. Those are company, realty, real estate, agency, associates, brokers, property, or properties. Now, the rules are being drafted, and we can't guarantee what will come out of the next draft. But it is becoming apparent that these new team names or prohibitions are somewhat limiting in some of the advertising. It is likely that with the new rules, it will become clear that if you include the word team after your name, it will clarify to the public that the name you have chosen is representing a team. For example, if I were to name a team, the Annalise Property Team, I might be safe. Or it could be the Betsy Urbance Company Team, and that team would make it safe and make it very clear to the public that the intent is to convey that you are a team and you are not an independent licensed entity. Section 1030F has also been changed. It has added some specific language. This is language that was in the Act years and years and years ago. But it's been revised now so that it's very clear again that under the Act, the language includes that the size of the agent or team name can't be any larger than that of the sponsoring broker company name. So in other words, the sponsoring broker must be equal to or larger than the agent or the team. Again, think about practical application. If you are doing some advertising and you are prohibited from conveying or suggesting to the public that you are, as an individual agent or team, the licensed entity, you are likely going to get yourself into some hot water. You have to make sure that on your sign, the name of your team is the same size as the sponsoring broker or smaller than that of the sponsoring broker. The Legal Hotline has received a lot of questions from members about the use of the prohibited terms in URLs and domain names. The bottom line is the names for URLs and domain names still cannot be misleading, and that was always the case under the Act.
As Annalise just said, there was a lot of confusion surrounding the use of URLs and domain names and the industry and the department recognizes that folks spend a lot of good money on those names. So they were looking for a solution. And with regard to the solution, this is what has been proposed in the rules to address the situation. So as we just said, it is still true that the URL or domain name can't be deceptive. But the way that it can't be deceptive is in that it cannot drive traffic in a deceptive manner. So proposed rule number 1 is in the advertising rule, and it says that use of a URL, domain name, username, social media handle, or other like name or location, if that's used for phishing or to deceptively drive traffic to another site or divert to another location, that would violate the advertising provisions of the Act. However, to counterbalance what I just said about the advertising rule and the location not being deceptive, the location to which someone might drive traffic, there's another proposed provision, and that's contained in what will now be known as the digital/electronic advertising rule. And there's language there that says a domain name or a URL or a social media handle will not be considered advertising. I just want to give you a quick example. So as long as your domain name, such as urbancerealestate.com, takes you within one click to Urbance team at ABC Realty, we're okay. On the other hand, if urbancerealestate.com takes you to Fiersto's team at ABC Realty, that's not okay. I think you can see the difference there, that one is deceptively driving traffic, but the fact of urbancerealestate.com alone is not considered deceptive advertising. So in that regard, the DRE, together with industry, represented by your Illinois Realtors, have negotiated a provision in the rules that, again, we note these are not final rules. They still have to go through certain levels of review, but DRE and industry have agreed in principle that this should be the rule. So hopefully, if it's not exactly the same, it will be very close to this. But the rule is this, and it's really two-parted. One, the first part of the rule that has been proposed is with regard to the logo versus the company name. The first part of it says, and is legally correct, that the logo, a company logo, is not part of the company's legal name. However, there are situations when the company name, the legal company name, is incorporated into a logo. In that case, if the company name is incorporated into the company logo, then that whole bit must be as big or bigger than that of a team name or an individual broker's name. So that's part 1 of the test. There's part 2 of the test, and those would be, in my mind, I call them kind of safe harbor provisions. If you want to get your ruler out and measure, this is the way you can be sure you're compliant with the license law and the rules under the license law. One is font size. If the font size of the sponsoring broker and the franchise affiliation is the same or larger than the font size of that contained in the broker team or individual broker's name, you will meet that safe harbor. The second safe harbor is an area. The area question would be when you take the whole sponsoring broker's name together with any franchise affiliation, and when measured by height and width, would cover the same size or more area than that of the team name or the individual broker's name. So that will be safe harbor number 2. Hopefully these provisions give you some really good concrete guidance about how you can comply in your advertising with this new old size restriction. Finally, with regard to guaranteed sales plans, guaranteed sales plans have always been contained in what I call the bad acts list, or essentially the list of things that licensees, if they do or don't do something, they can get in trouble for. So the guaranteed sales plans have been taken out of that list, I shouldn't say taken out, to violate the provisions of the new statutory section, remains in the bad acts list, but there's a new provision that really deals with guaranteed sales plans specifically. So if someone is going to offer a guaranteed sales plan, they must meet the letter of the provision that is now its own standing section in RELA. What are those things? Some of the items that have to be included in a guaranteed sales plan are, I guess first and foremost, I should say, that you need to negotiate the guaranteed sales price. If you're the listing agent, or you want to be the listing agent, you have to come to the guaranteed sales price before you sign the listing. So this gets you out of a situation where you would be an investor in property that you have listed, which would be prohibited under the License Act, and that you can't be a dual agent. So you have to negotiate a specific price that is the guaranteed sale price. Then you would have to show your seller client that you have the ability, the financial wherewithal, to make good on your promise to buy if the property doesn't sell during your guaranteed sales period. Then you have to market the property exactly the way you would any regular old listing. So those provisions are now very clear. They're in a separate section of RELA, and they are still contained in the bad acts list if you don't meet all the requirements that are set forth in that new section on guaranteed sales plans.